My name is Coen Janssen. I'm one of the founders of Hiber. Current title is Director of Business Intelligence. And we just turned 4 years old. So about 4 years ago, we founded the company together with Laurens Groenendijk, Erik Wink, and Maarten Engelen. And set off on a crazy adventure. I think that's fair to say. So within Hiber, we are providing Internet of Things solutions via satellite connectivity. And therefore, we make it possible to read out any sensor or application out in the open on a global basis with low cost and very low power as well. So that's in short, basically what we do and where we come from. As a personal background, it's maybe an interesting story to tell as well. So back at the time I studied Aerospace Engineering. Found out I was not a typical engineer. So did a little bit of investment banking after graduation, as well as strategic consultancy. And about 5-6 years ago, I ran into various angel investors who said, Koen, we're going to make money in the space industry. Just don't know how, but join us and let's see what happens. So basically on that simple pitch, I quit my job and started the adventure of what is nowadays Hiber. But the first year was basically doing market research and finding out how to basically become an entrepreneur in the space industry. Looked into companies like Planet, Earth Observation, Spire with tracking all kinds of fishing vessels. And eventually we said, well, you know, everyone is talking about broadband internet constellations. Nowadays it kind of became fruitful, I think, with Starlink launching tons of satellites, etc. But when it comes to Internet of Things, we're not talking about broadband continuous connectivity, but really about, you know, simple status updates of sensors once in a while instead of all the time. So can we make some kind of business proposition out of the whole? So it's really how we saw that satellites on the one hand became from institutional to a really commercial market, especially with the standardization of these small satellites that we use as well. And in the meantime, we saw that Internet of Things, even 5 years ago, was seen in the research papers as it's really coming. And we read the same thing 10 years, of course, ago as well, and maybe even 15. But you saw that the time to market was really on the edge of, okay, Internet of Things is really going to happen. It's no longer just the egg cooker talking to the fridge. There are real cases there. There is clear ROIs for the industry. And if that is really the case, then connectivity is required in the remote areas as well. So that is basically where we come from, and me personally as well.
It's such an interesting story, and it's you know, the concept of the Internet of Things and then the making it a reality. It is a journey, which leads me into my first, my second question. Which is really to ask you to describe what IoT means to you. So it means so many different things to different people, and there's no clear or one simple definition. So maybe from your point of view, just using your own words, what does IoT mean?
Yeah, so for me, IoT is a true enabler for all kinds of great improvements in daily life, I would say. Maybe that is a little bit generic or vague, but there's not a lot of innovation happening in the world, I think, where the increase in productivity or the truck rolls reduction or all these kind of examples that you can come up with IoT have, you know, kind of like a 3, 5, maybe even 10x factor improvement instead of the regular, you know, 1 to 3%. And that is something that stands for me. It's not a definition, so to say, and also probably not a clarification what IoT means for me, but still, this is the big thing that enables IoT, basically.
Cool, and it's so true. It's so big. It's difficult to kind of grasp, and therefore you have to be talking in kind of big terms, to describe it in any way. Okay, so the question I wanted to ask you was about the ecosystem. You know,
Mhm.
so Hiber is based in the Netherlands, which is one of the most innovative countries in the world. You know, with a very, very kind of active startup scene. You
Mhm.
know, Hiber have been voted kind of one of the Dutch national icons, which is just in some ways shows the huge potential that a company like Hiber has in this, you know, to lead the way for all of these other businesses. But if we then look about the ecosystem that is IoT, and then also kind of who your customers are, can you describe kind of the ecosystem from your point of view, from your perspective?
Yeah, so this is quite a challenge, and thanks for mentioning that the National Icon Award, because we are really proud of what we have accomplished over those years, and that is being recognized by the Dutch government now as well, which we are definitely proud of. But we have had some tough learnings to do over those 4 years as well, and one of them especially is within the ecosystem. So when we founded the company, we really thought that I basically have one here. If we just have a little modem and an antenna and we provide connectivity subscriptions, we are there. Because the rest of the ecosystem would pick up, connectivity is required, everyone is asking for it. So just, pick up that modem and start selling. Then we see that basically everyone in the ecosystem is doing his or her little part, but nobody is, giving a full end-to-end solution to the customer that is in need of such a thing. So also for us, with all the hustles that come with, integrating such a modem, if you want to have your first prototype up and running, you run into tons of trouble mechanically, design-wise. So you're spending tons of hours and tens of thousands of euros to just get your first prototype ready. And I'm not even talking about our prototype with satellites, which is way more expensive. But just for the customer to get something up and running, it's such a hassle. So we said, okay, maybe we should make it way more easy for the customers to start. And maybe this is a story that a lot of IoT players say, because there's definitely immaturity within the ecosystem. But we really said, okay, we need to provide a full end-to-end solution to the customer first, before we can rely on just the connectivity part, which was the foundation of our company. So there's a lot to learn. I think the Dutch ecosystem is good. Nonetheless, of course, it has its restrictions, and especially for a global company like us, the Netherlands is well covered with connectivity. So plenty of customers, I would say, that are working internationally, but the amount of sensors and subscriptions we expect to have operational in the Netherlands itself is rather small.
Yeah, and I think thinking globally, but being local is kind of part of what this is all about, and just the time to market for different types of product is very different, especially when you're thinking about scale. And I don't even want to think about all the stuff you need to do to get something in space. Okay, so if we then kind of flip this and look at this in a slightly different perspective, one of the things I've always liked about Hiber is you're very customer centric, and there you're saying that very early on you saw that you needed to kind of think more in solutions. Mm-hmm. Can you maybe talk about kind of the leadership skills and kind of ways of working that you think companies such as yourself need to have right now, given the maturity of the IoT ecosystem, and kind of to help companies succeed now?
So I think one of the there are a few quotes, right? So to start with one from the space industry, the easiest way to become a millionaire in the space industry is start as a billionaire. So there's something similar, I think, within IoT, where IoT is defined as the death by 1,000 verticals. There are so many applications, there's so many markets, there's so much potential. So where do I start? And we have a bit of a sales team here. We're very commercially driven. However, the amount of applications that get into our info inbox is tremendous. And even after lots of brainstorming, you just never end up with the amount of applications that continues to grow. So for us, in the first years, basically, we said, okay, every opportunity is a good one. And, let's see where we end up. Where's the focus? Okay, we see some traction in the agricultural business, but is there then willingness to pay? Because it's more like nice to have than like a tremendous value. So bit by bit you learn, but eventually you say, okay, to really get going, I need to start focusing on, as I mentioned earlier, the few end-to-end solutions that we believe in. And it's not even that long ago that we really said, okay, it's been a lot of fun. We learned tons of things. We did every version of market segmentation that we could do. It remains a puzzle. It's quite frizzy, but you know what? If we provide this solution, we can basically cover 80% of that market segment. And although that doesn't really reach 100%, even if you look into the agricultural business, there are still 500 different applications again to cover. So even if you picked one market, you're still nowhere. So you really have to be laser focused on that 1, 2, maybe 3 solutions that you want to go for. And, put all your resources in that and eventually grow afterwards. But to really get into the market first, you need to have those few showcases before you can scale, instead of randomly trying to catch everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of good advice there. And I think like it's focus is definitely something, and then also understanding, but you're also at the point where you have to kind of bet the company on a few strategies and then go for it. So you must also be working with people who kind of at the moment don't have any IoT, don't have maybe the data that they're looking for, who are saying, oh, brilliant, Hiber can enable me to have data in a way I've never had it before. Mm-hmm. You've talked there about your own lessons and advice based on kind of the IoT ecosystem. But what advice would you have for somebody who's outside the ecosystem, who's wanting to adopt IoT for the first time, who might come to you to say, hey, Hiber, can you help me? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, so I think there are 2 main elements there. One of them, I think the majority of IoT deployments actually fail, not because of technology, but because the organization is not ready to do anything with the data. So, that's just a hard sell. So therefore, either you have new entrepreneurs that willing to do something with IoT, or you're talking about larger corporations, and they need to have their structure in place before they can actually start playing around with it, because there's too much data to be gained. And if it's not simple enough, is the pressure higher or lower than a certain threshold? Operationally, it's very easy to execute upon. But if you're talking about a large corporate which needs to install that into their own software systems, goes through tons of checks before you can, have the simple operator saying, hey, I need to do something. That will remain a challenge all the time. And those are, incredibly large implementation strategies whatsoever. When it comes to the new entrepreneurs, though, which are rather new with IoT, there is, once again, such a large market opportunity that if you're going to start choosing in which field you want to be active, you should be aware that you need incredible domain knowledge of the area you're going to be active in. And that's, part of the death by 1,000 verticals again, because you cannot have domain knowledge in every single detail of the solution for all these different applications. So bring your expertise that you have to good use and start there.
That's some excellent thinking. Thank you for that. Okay, so if we then kind of like we've covered quite a few different kind of perspectives here. Now I kind of want to talk about success. So there's what success means to you. And I kind of asked you in preparation for this, and I saw you filled that in. So you've already thought about it. But there's kind of, I asked this specifically because there's Coen the person, there's Coen who's the co-founder of a business, who's now kind of got lots of people working for you and trying to succeed there. And then there's kind of the industry or IoT trying to do the big changes like you talked about right at the very beginning. So it's quite a broad question, so I will just let you answer it any way that you wish. But if I ask you what success means to you, how would you answer that?
Yeah, so the way I answered it when I had the opportunity to think about it is, may the best of you today, may the worst of you tomorrow, which basically looks into continuous growth of you as a human being. No matter which aspect of life, but especially also in business, there's tons of learning to do at every age, at any experience. And, the last 4 years here at Hiber has been one big roller coaster. I'm not going to say every day was better than the day before, but it has ups and downs, sideways, and at some point you don't even know that you are upside down. That's the kind of life you kind of have to be able to deal with, not only yourself, but especially your surroundings. So your family, your friends, your relationship. So for me, it's quite natural to say, hey, I need to move appointments all the time. Then again, other people say, hey, you're unreliable because, we made this appointment 3 weeks ago and now you're changing it last minute. So it's constantly shifting between priorities, what is important and what not. Looking at a little bit more of a global perspective, I think that there is a beautiful opportunity to do tech for good, as these kind of projects are being mentioned. But you have a sideline there, which is called impact investment, which has the same returns, but also does good to the world. And, the way we see things at Hiber is, we want to do good for the globe. We want to do good for humanity. And apparently we can make money that way as well. And that is kind of like, pursuing the sustainable development goals of the United Nations while we are trying to create a better world, which is something that our employees are really careful about as well.
Cool, thank you. And I think that's such a nice point because it's also kind of trying to attract a whole generation to come into IoT, because it is one of those industries where it's not necessarily about creating more. It's about making the world more sustainable, more efficient. So thanks for making that point. I think that's a really important one, that IoT is actually a home for lots of people who want to make an impact in the world, but also have fun along the way and learn loads. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to stop the interview there. So thank you, Coen.
Okay.